In this video, I'm going to be looking at the feature-packed OBSBOT Tail-Air AI Tracking PTZ camera. And if you think that's a mouthful, then wait until you see what features this camera has to offer. First off, OBSBOT did kindly reach out and send me this camera for free, which is really nice of them. I did permit them to send me some talking points and use cases in a document, and also to have a quick look at this video before posting, just to make sure all the technical parts were correct. However, I maintain full creative control of this video and the editing process, and my opinions regarding how this would work in my studio and live streaming are 100% my own. So with that, let's get on with it. You can see the OBSBOT comes in a very nice red box with some instruction manuals. The actual camera itself is in this really nice hard-wearing case with a nice zippable cover, and you can see that it's contained very nicely in here. We've got all the connectors. The first one is the USB-A to the USB-C converter. Then we have the standard USB-C cable, and then we have the USB-C to USB-C splitter, so you can charge and stream at the same time. The camera is very nicely packed, and you can see it looks really nice when it's out of the box. Let's take a quick look at the specs of this camera and why I think they are impressive for something of this size and portability. So first off, the camera lens is equivalent to a 23mm on a full frame system and has a fixed aperture of f1.8, which is great for low light conditions and creating some dreamy depth of field. Now, it can also record up to 4K at 30 frames per second, has a maximum resolution of 3856 by 2176 pixels. It also supports 1080p up to 60 frames per second and has a 4x digital zoom. It features manual and autofocus, beauty filters together with AI tracking, which I'll get onto later in this video. Another great feature that comes with this camera is the ability to live stream directly without having to use a third-party program like Ecamm Live or OBS. Now, my streaming, I use Ecamm, directly connecting this camera via HDMI at 4K, but the Tail-Air does come with some streaming services built in. So you can use RTMP directly to a service, or you can connect to your YouTube account via your Google login, and you can stream directly from this camera, making it very portable and super easy to use for live streaming. This camera has a ton of connectivity features. You can actually use it over Bluetooth, Wi-Fi, NDI, RTMP, RTSP for streaming, and power over Ethernet using the additional USB-C to Ethernet adapter. Now, this camera can also be controlled using an add-on remote control, which I don't have, or from an app that runs iOS, Mac, or Windows. And you can actually control up to 3 Tail-Air cameras simultaneously for full studio production. Now, just note that the NDI connectivity does require additional paid license, which I don't have for this review, which costs at the time of this video $99. So I've spoken about all the specifications and what this camera can do, but what does the video quality actually look like? Well, here it is. You can see for yourself. I've got the Tail-Air connected via a capture card to my Mac, using the micro HDMI connector, which isn't ideal. It's not the larger form factor, but you just have to be careful with the plug on these small little connectors. It's being sent at 4K 25 frames per second, and we're not zoomed in or anything like that right now. This is the full image that you're seeing, and I think the quality is pretty good. I'll show you the settings in a moment, but in terms of tracking, there's nothing set up on this camera at the moment, but you can enable all the AI tracking features with handheld gestures, and I'll show you how to do that right now. If I hold my hand up, I will get some notification on the camera, which means the LED will change from a green to blue. So now I'm in tracking mode, and if I move to the left and to the right, you can see that it's set to slowly pan and track me, which looks really nice. It's very natural. It's not too jerky or fast or anything like that. Now, if I show you actually on the OBSBOT software itself, you can see that there is a frame around me, and that's the tracking frame. It's showing that the actual tracking is enabled. And there's a couple of other gestures that you can do as well. If I put my hand up to disable the tracking, You can see the tracking window has stopped. Let's just zoom in. You can use a gesture control with an L, and that's going to digitally zoom in now to, into my face. If I put the tracking back on again, it should sort of start centering it and making sure that my face is center in the frame. If I move left and right. Now this is digitally zoomed in. There is no optical zoom on this camera, which is a shame. It would be nice if it was optically zoomed, but you can get away with certain types of digital zoom that doesn't look too bad. Let me disable the tracking again. And now I'm going to zoom out by doing the L sign. Now it's completely zoomed out. And there's another way of actually controlling the level of zoom, and it's using the two L controls like this. And if I just do this, it will zoom in and I can stop and I can turn on the tracking again. Now it's going to track my face and I can move left and right. If I wanted to actually zoom out, I put my hands like this and I will zoom out, and I'll do that again. And it's actually trying to track me at the same time. So what I tend to do is disable the tracking and then I zoom out using this control like that. And it's just waiting for me to zoom out. There it is. All right, so it's pretty straightforward. You just have to get used to the hand gestures. I'll turn on the tracking again. But it's pretty cool, right? And you can control this obviously with your hand gestures, which is superb for a solo creator like myself. I don't have to worry about setting all this up. There is one other hand gesture. It's not going to work for me right now because I don't have an SD card connected in the back. But if you do the OK sign, it will actually try and start recording. It's going to beep at me because there's no SD card in here, but that's how you turn on and stop the recording. Let's just switch the tracking back off for a second. And just go back to the Sony camera, to the main camera. And as you can see, all pretty good. So pretty easy in terms of setting up the camera for gestures, and the quality looks pretty good. Let's dig into the software and show you how I've set it up on my settings. We go over here to OBSBOT, you go to the resources here and go to download, and you'll get to this page where you'll see all the various cameras. We're going to click on the OBSBOT Tailor, which is obviously the one that we're using. And you've got two software options, one for your iOS, Android, or Google devices, which is called the OBSBOT Start. You obviously can select the version that you want. And then for the desktop, there is a new version called OBSBOT Center, which was formerly OBSBOT Webcam. I've got the Mac version because I'm using a Mac, and this is where you can then set up the OBSBOT for various settings. You can use this device out of the box, but there is a little bit of setup that you need to do first, and we'll talk about that very quickly right now. So here I am on my desktop. This is the OBSBOT Center software. There are a ton of features that you can configure and set up here. I'm just going to show you some of the ones that I've set up and changed. The top left is the video feed or the video preview, and as I mentioned before, this is great because this gives you a live latency-free video feed, as you can see I'm waving here, of the actual camera. This is both for the iOS app and the desktop app. Show me at the moment that obviously this is where the tracking is. I've got my tracking set to me. And one of the things I've changed straight away is I've set the tracking speed to slow. I don't want the tracking to be too fast. That whip and pan look when it's set to fast is okay for fast moving objects, but I think it can be quite distracting, especially when you're moving around and doing it like a talking head video as I'm doing now. So if I set that to slow, the movements are subtle. It's like a camera person slowly panning and moving the camera with you, and I don't think it's too distracting with that. But obviously, it's a personal preference. You might want to disable that and turn that off. The tracking modes are normal, upper body and close-up tracking. That simply means that it has some presets depending on the framing and what it's actually looking at. If you change this to upper body, it potentially could start zooming in and so on, depending on if I move further away from the camera, but I've set mine at the moment to normal tracking. There's also an AI mode here for animal and group tracking. I have cats, that would be great for me. Animal tracking would be super, could chase them around all over the place. And that's it for this particular first menu, which is console. If I go to image, the only other thing I've changed is I've basically set everything to manual. My shutter speed is 1/50 because I'm shooting at the moment in 25 frames a second. ISO is set to 200. This camera is great for low light. I don't need a ton of light to get a decent image. I've got control lighting in here. but because it's got an f1.8 lens, it lets in a ton of light, so it's super duper. White balance is set to custom. I know what my light temperature is here, so it's set to 5200 Kelvin. And then the only other thing I've changed in image is I've basically wound down the sharpness to 0. I don't like in-camera sharpening. It's a personal choice. For talking head videos like this, I can put this into Final Cut, change the sharpening if I want. But again, you need to dial in your own settings, so it's a personal preference. Take a look at what the image looks like to you, and then dial in the settings accordingly. The final one is on More, and this is where you set up your frame rates and resolutions depending on what output method you have selected. If I go down to the bottom to start with, I've got mine set to HDMI here, so my output, I want it to be 4K, and as it mentioned here, recording via NDI, RTSP, and so on, only supports one 4K output, which means that if you were to change the resolution here for RTSP to 4K, it would switch this HDMI output back to 1080p. So only one of these settings can have 4K running at a time. Now that's fine as long as you remember, because if you set this, for example, to recording now to be 4K, if we go outside and do some recording, when I come back and plug in my HDMI connector, that's going to be set back now to 1080p, and that might be not what you want. So just make sure you eyeball these settings before you change anything, whether it be doing HDMI output, recording, or live streaming via the UVC mode. It's just something that could catch you out if you don't set it up accordingly. All right, let's take a look at some other settings of this amazing little camera. Let me show you where those are. If you click over here to this little face, you'll click on that and you'll see something called Beauty. Now, beauty filters are simply that. You can change multiple different things on here, which are quite interesting. You can change the bokeh or the blur level, similar to what you can do on some of the Apple filters and other software. So let's click on that. And you can see already that it's blurred out my background. I'm going to move the slider all the way to 1, not very blurry at all. And then I'm going to wind it up all the way to 6. Look at that bokeh. Oh, bokeh, isn't it beautiful? It's having a few issues with my hair. In fact, I have a few issues with my hair, but that's another story. It's a bit too much, so let's wind it down to 3. 3 is probably acceptable. It gives you a little bit of sort of that nice bokeh blur level, similar to what you can get with the Apple built-in software as well, but that's pretty cool. Let's just turn off bokeh for a second. Retouch. Ooh, you can turn on retouch and go crazy. So let's just turn on retouch for a second, and let's have a play with this. Quite funny. Let's do custom. In fact, let's do native first of all. What does that do? That's a bit weird. Okay, classic. That's just wrong. And let's do for man. What does it do for man? Did I notice a difference? Let's click on custom. Oh yeah, look at that. Smooth the skin a bit, made things look a whole lot better. I mean, you need a lot of work, let's be honest. And you can see here that it smooths the face, slims the face down. Let's shrink that down. Ooh. After my diet? Before my diet? After my diet? Before my diet? Okay, that's a bit interesting. So slim that down a little bit. That's interesting. And narrow. Does that narrow the face even more? Oh yeah. So look at that. Even narrows the face even more. There's lots you can do here. Let's smooth that skin. Let's make it crazy. These are the zoom filters that we all know and love. When you meet people in real life and they say, well, you don't look like this. Why wouldn't you want to look like this in real life? I think that's a great addition. Anyway, all joking aside, you can do quite a few things with a retouch. In fact, let's just put this back to custom. You can do face individually, so you can change things with the eyes. Ooh, that's great. Make them bigger and smaller, I guess. I mean, the AI features is amazing these days, and you can do lots of things. I might want to change my nose. Let's change that a bit. Is that working? I don't know. That's making it bigger, isn't it? So it's making the nose bigger. And you have so much fun with this. This is great. And then obviously you can slim the body down. You can change the legs. And obviously if you're doing full body tracking, as you can do, then you can really go to town and make yourself look, well, completely different. Let's get some blush, maybe. Let's do some blushing. Okay. No. And let's do some lipstick. I think you get the idea, but the point is that you can do many different wonderful things with this camera. You can make yourself look much better than you are in real life, and it will track you as well. So you've got a built-in makeup artist, a built-in camera person. In fact, everything is done for you on this camera. Marvelous. So let me just show you the director grids. What you're seeing here is the iPad output from the OBSBOT application, and then to the right of you is the actual HDMI feed from the camera itself. So all I want to show you is the way that you can actually set some presets and move the camera around and then switch between them. So by default, if I click on the icon below the house here, you can see that we've got the on-her shot, which is the one that's actually running at the moment, the wide angle, which is what I've got it set to, auto, which is going to try and digitally zoom in and find the best frame for me, or the face shot. So if I do auto, it's going to punch in a little bit, and it's doing this digitally right now. It's not actually tracking me. It's taking the whole frame and then digitally zooming in. You can see that there is an actual red frame around, and that's the framing that it's set up for me at the moment, trying to keep me sort of center frame. If I go back to this, I can now click on face, and that's going to punch in digitally again using the digital zoom, and you can see that the red frame around my face now is keeping that subject directly in the frame. I can use this little button here to move the camera around a little bit to get the framing where I want. If I wanted the framing over here to the right, let's say, of the room, it's going to obviously try and keep me again in the center of the frame, and you can see that it's trying to sort of pan and position accordingly. Now I've just put my hand up now to actually get me framed using AI tracking. So now if I move around, the AI tracking is going to kick in and start to track me. If I go back to these options, you've now got close-up, half body and full body, and these are the three presets that I mentioned before when you look at the AI tracking. So if I actually stand up, it's going to do its best now to obviously try and track me as it's doing that. If I set to half body, it's going to again digitally try and zoom in a little bit. Let's do that. And you can see that it's actually still capturing me here, and I'm sort of digitally zoomed in. If I go out of this and set to close up, that's going to now and try and keep me in the frame and as close up as possible. So there are a number of different sort of framing options that you can use. So let me just stop the tracking for a second. So the tracking stopped. You can see the frame has gone to full screen. Let's set up some presets really quickly that you can recall. So apart from the director grid that you've got listed here, you can set up your own presets if you want to pan and zoom the camera around and save them. Let's just use this little dialog thumb wheel here to move the camera around. So I'm going to put it sort of over here. So if I wanted to point out something, I don't know, near my glass of water that I've got, let's hit the plus P button down here at the bottom, and that's going to set a position point for that frame. Let's go and move this around a little bit. Get the tool back up again. I'm now going to zoom over here. You can see the P position point is highlighted. Let's move it over here. So I wanted to show a little bit about this Stream Deck. I'm going to set another position point, which is position 2. And then one last time, we can actually do the reset here, and it'll sort of switch the camera straight into where it's meant to be set. I'm just going to do that here. I can also pinch and zoom. So if I wanted to sort of zoom in a little bit, I can by using this crop tool. I'm just going to pinch in to where I want it to be framed, which is a bit high up. I'm going to move it up here to there. So now that's my punch in close shot, and I'll just hit P3 for that. So now if I toggle between these different settings, P1 is going to obviously pop it down to where I wanted it before. P2 is going to position it over to the left, and then P3 is going to move it over there. So you can see that I'm just toggling between these different presets, and it's already showing me what it's going to look like. Now obviously the camera that you're seeing to your right is already punched in because it's the HDMI feed and not the full screen. But you get the idea that just switching between these modes gives you multiple options of switching the camera super easily. If I go back to the director grid, you can see that it's also saved all my presets in the director grid. So if I just go back to the wide angle shot, there you go, that's the wide angle. And if I go to P1, it's obviously going to punch in over there. P2, it's going to be where this is. And then P3 is the super duper close up, and nobody wants to see that. Director grids, super easy to set up and use. And it's a great way of getting the camera to be basically positioned on how you want. Well, hello. Now I'm outside with the OBSBOT. I just wanted to see what it would look like in auto mode, everything. So all I've done is got the phone connected to the OBSBOT directly, and it's great that you can actually connect to its own Wi-Fi, so you don't have to rely on your own. Obviously, if you're outdoors, you're not going to have your own Wi-Fi together. So let's get it to track me. It's tracking me well, so I'm just going to walk around. I'm just going to click on my face here on the iPhone app just to make sure that the focus is working on the auto exposure, and I'm just going to walk around. So I've set this to auto everything. So auto exposure, auto white balance, everything that you would expect if you're just out and about. I'm just going to go behind this little plant. And then I'm just going to walk away and go behind this door. I've set the panning and the tracking to smooth or slow because I don't want it to whip and pan around. And I'm just walking and it's tracking me well. So let's go and look at some of the presets. Let's go to half body. So what that's going to do is going to change the framing now with this preset, and hopefully it's going to keep me sort of half frame shot. You can see with the red line around the app, it's actually zooming in digitally to keep me in the frame. I don't know how the quality is once it's zooming in. Now, unfortunately, this doesn't have an optical zoom. It just has a digital zoom. It would be nice if it had optical because that would be a bit better. It's not sort of keeping me in that frame. Let's just make sure I didn't mess the tracking up, which I probably did because I put my hand up there. So it's still keeping me digitally zoomed in here with a half frame. Let's go back to one of the other director grids. Let's do a close-up. So now it's going to try and keep me as close as possible as a sort of a tight headshot. But as you can imagine, as a solo creator, I'm just basically walking around, just sort of clicking a button here, making sure that this thing is set to how I want. I'm just going to set it back to wide now. And it's great. I've actually noticed that I click on this. Yeah, so click on the face. And that's going to zoom into the face shot now. And if I just keep that tracking set up as well, it should work perfectly. So I'm just going to walk around, go out a frame. Hopefully you can still hear me. And then I'm just going to come back into frame. And you can see it's tracked me straight away and picked me up. I mean, it's pretty impressive how this thing tracks. I'm just going to change the tracking mode. I set it to standard tracking now. It should track me a little bit quicker as I'm walking around. I'm just going to zoom in. You can see it's pretty good. And just tracking quicker means that, you know, if you've got fast moving objects, it's going to track you pretty well. So let's go over here. Let's just set this now to fast. It's going to be really trying to whip around and keep up with me. I think that's exceptional though. I mean, it's keeping me fully in the frame. Let's just change this to auto. So I've just set to auto framing now. It's going to keep the subject in the center of the frame. You can see the little grid around me. I think it looks good. Let's just set it to wide. And there you have it. So I think from a tracking perspective, I'm outdoors, a solo creator. I've got my Rode connected microphone here. It's great. I've had this camera now for a couple of weeks and I have noticed a few differences between the OBSBOT Studio versus the OBSBOT Start apps. Specifically, there's not full parity between them, so things like the beauty filters and animal tracking are actually on the desktop app, but I couldn't find them on the mobile. I also noticed that despite me toggling the settings, restarting and even factory resetting the camera a couple of times, I couldn't get the tail to record or send HDMI 4K output at 24 frames per second. Only 25 and 30 were supported. So I'm going to be asking OBSBOT if there is an issue with the camera, or specifically, is it a regional based thing where, as I'm in Europe, I can't set my camera to 24 frames per second. I've had this camera now for a couple of weeks and I've thoroughly enjoyed using it. It's perfect for me as a solo content creator and live streamer. In fact, it's great for educators, fitness instructors, event recordings, anybody who really needs a reliable camera that's going to track their movements automatically. The AI tracking is really good, as you've seen, and it allows me to basically worry about the content I'm delivering and not worry about the framing and anything else. The presets are fantastic. I can just set the camera up into different sort of pans and setups and leave it at that, and at a touch of a button I can recall them. Live streamers like myself, can take advantage of this. You can go directly from the camera and live stream. You can connect it to your Mac or PC via USB or HDMI like I'm connecting to it now. So the quality is really good, and I'd encourage you to take a look at this camera if you are wanting to do live streaming or solo content creating and letting the AI tracking take care of the framing for you. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you did get some enjoyment out of this video. And if you want to know more about the OBSBOT Tail Air, then there are some links in the description below. Go and check it out for yourself, and I will see you in the next video.